All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of OP Radio. I'm your host, Mac. We have some very special friends and guests joining us today. Before we get into the topic of today's show, let's just do a quick round of introductions. I'd like to start with a colleague of mine. You all know him. You all love him. Benji. Good morning, Benji. How are you?
Hello, everybody. I am Benji. I currently do DevRel at Optimism and help teams get started and win on OP Mainnet and the broader superchain.
And we're also joined with a couple of other friends this morning. Let's start with Greg. Greg, do you want to let the folks know on OP Radio who you are and what you do?
Greg Brasnitz, thanks for having us. I'm head of events and partnerships for FWB.
Thank you. And then Alex.
Hey guys, I'm Alex. I'm the mayor at FWB.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get right into it. Some of us recently attended a very cool gathering in the woods of California, a thing called Fest. And Benji was there. Benji, I'm very curious, what was Fest and how was it?
Yeah, so a little background. I think one of the big things is in crypto, we often meet a lot of people online. And a lot of us here, we've made friends through crypto. We've made friends through Twitter, various different sources. And there's this keen sense of community that we find in this like digital corner of the internet that we're in. And Fest is basically the IRL version of that, where all of your friends, all of these folks who you've met online and spoken to for years are culminating in this beautiful spot nestled in the beautiful forest area of Idlewild, California. And we were just there listening to folks speaking about what they're doing, listening to music, having kind of events. And it was just truly a special moment. And I think Fest is essentially the culmination of that. What I said earlier, that all of this online crypto world, but bringing it to the real world and also learning a lot more about each other through things like music, through things like art. We're able to meet a bunch of incredible creators, a bunch of incredible artists, a bunch of people who are very involved in DAOs, people who are building new apps in the space, a lot of consumer social apps, and overall just the incredible like melting of the minds. It served as almost like the melting pot of this online realm that we've all found ourselves in, and physical manifestation of that. So that was essentially general holistic overview of like Fest. And I think one of the key things is actually going on the grounds and meeting the people behind the profile pictures has been truly remarkable in the sense of like understanding where people are coming from and what people would like to see. And when it comes to an optimism context, I think we're already seeing a lot of interest, especially within the creative realm, thanks to things like Sound, thanks to Zora, thanks to Manifold, where there's definitely an immersion within the on-chain culture /NFT/art side happening on OP Mainnet as we speak. And being able to be at Fest and see and meet these people in real life was truly something eye-opening. And I'm absolutely stoked, guys, on where this takes us in the next phase of creators on Optimism and culture on Optimism. And yeah, that was Fest.
Yeah, I think, the internet friends are the friends you choose. So I think this is a really interesting concept of taking all these people that maybe you're in a Discord channel with them, you follow them on Twitter, and bringing that IRL in real life and sharing this experience together was really something. And so, yeah, it was a 3-day festival with different on-chain or online expositions, different talks, and also a bunch of musical performances in an absolutely beautiful setting in the woods of California. Yeah, I'm curious, Benji, like what was your favorite part of Fest?
So all the events were spectacular. We had some incredible performances. I loved all the talks too. So variety of talks, everything from DAO related, like how can we organize new collectives together, talks about what like FWB is, which we'll dive into in this podcast as well. But also I would say out of all of that, the fondest moments was just being able to have one-on-one conversations by the like lunch area, by the little library area, deeper within like the forest area, by the trees and everything. And just speaking to like new people and having the realization that this crypto world is so massive. It's truly humongous. There's so much behind all of the people within this realm, within this industry. And most importantly, like there's so much depth, there's so much vision, and there's so much humility behind all of the people as well. I would say holistically, I know it's kind of cheating saying that, but I would say my favorite part because of that is just like realizing that we can be online and we can be in front of our screens and we can be within one chamber of thought. But when we actually look deeper, we see all of the people behind the profile pictures and we realize everyone has such an interesting background. Some people were professional poker players in the past. Some people were professional musicians. People are professional musicians. Some people may like various different things. Some people are all over from all over the world. And I think my favorite part was just like really seeing that and realizing there's just so much depth in this beautiful place in the internet, off the internet we have found ourselves in. And yeah, I would say that's definitely something that I will keep with me, where there's a very human side behind everything that we're doing. And it really reminded me of that, like meeting folks in person and having music and art all around us to just like elicit a lot of different types of conversations. I would say that was definitely my highlight.
Absolutely. Yeah. These kind of in real events really allow for these serendipitous meetings and conversations. Those were some of my favorite moments as well. One afternoon, in addition, above and beyond all the amazing music performances, which I was really impressed by, to be honest. And I'm pretty picky with music, but wow, there were some great musicians there. But one afternoon, we were kind of hanging out and it was very hot, right? It's August in California. And we're like, what should we do? And I was like, man, I'd really like to just jump in a river right now. And a friend of ours looked at their Google Maps and it looked like there was a waterway not that far from us. So we just took off in the woods, found this amazing, beautiful river. And we weren't the only ones because actually there were a lot of other people hanging out by the river and just had a bunch of really good conversations, hanging out in nature on some rocks in the beautiful California nature. That was a big highlight for me.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to add one of the really interesting parts about what FWB has put together is there's a lot of folks, because of just the eclectic nature of everyone there, there's a lot of folks who had various different familiarity levels with crypto. And that was very eye-opening. I think the range of individuals that we saw was very eye-opening in general, because there were folks who were just starting in crypto. And that was incredible to just hear about their journey, how they got started, and doing that amongst this beautiful natural oasis was truly something incredible. And I think it really informs a lot of stuff working within the protocol side, where when it comes to things like UX, how do people get started? Not only just what bridge did they use, but what was the feeling that initially got them to want to try this out? And I think we really, really dug deep into the emotions behind why people enter crypto, and more importantly, why people stay in crypto. And being able to just do that in Idlewild is just absolutely gorgeous.
Absolutely. Moving on here, we have some of the people responsible for putting on Fest, and I'd really like to hear from them. So maybe we'll start with Greg and Alex. This is our first time at Fest, but this is the second year that you guys had it, as far as my understanding goes. How was this year different from last year?
Well, first and foremost, we sold out this year, which was amazing. I think when you do the first year of anything, you kind of just wonder if it's going to happen. You just kind of run towards the finish line. And last year was just an evolution. We've done a lot of events over the last couple of years. I think we've done about 200 events worldwide, anything from small art meetups to dinner parties, all the way up to bigger tentpole events around Art Basel and NFT NYC. A lot of our backgrounds are events and bringing together communities through culture. So I think the natural evolution was just to get to something like Fest. And last year was just something we did. We just thought it would be cool and it was great. It was mostly for members. And then this year, one of the things we wanted to do is expand it. We had more partners that wanted to come do more talks. We had more musicians that wanted to come play. And we just had, larger people within the cultural Web3 crypto space that wanted to attend. So we opened it up and was pretty amazed by as you already mentioned, the mix of people and the wide range of people that came. So it felt even more well-rounded, from the crypto curious to the deep natives.
Yeah, I was going to add that I just think philosophically, the difference between year one and year two was year one, we took a much more sort of centrally curated approach where, we had about 400 folks participate, and, FWB, DAO, sort of the core organizing entity, really led the entire booking of the talks and the music and the curation element of it. And this year, for year two, we really made an intentional decision to take more of a sort of platform approach in terms of inviting over 30 different on-chain partners and communities like Optimism, Base, Zora, Zorazine, many other Seed Club, OpenSea, many other groups to come participate and effectively bring their culture to the festival or to the platform, if you will, and bring their content and programming and communities and teams. And so this year, the festival just felt a lot more pluralist, which was really exciting as we want to continue to, grow the event in a much more expansive and inclusive way.
Awesome. And I'm curious, sounds like first year was kind of a proof of concept. This year it was proved out. I know it's a little early, Greg and Alex, but were there any learnings that you're already seeing from this year that you'd like to maybe integrate for the next?
It's interesting. A lot of the feedback we got year one from year two, there was a lot of changes that we made. Year two and for year three, it was a lot more subtle. The best thing about friends with benefits in general are actually the friends. I know it always comes up as kind of cheesy and corny, but like where we thrive best are the community members. And so anytime we do these large gatherings, people want to try to meet as many of the other people as possible. And again, because it was such a diverse group of people, maybe people kind of fell into their own natural grouping, or they felt that they didn't get a chance to meet everyone. So more community building was one of the things that I'm starting to see really come out, and the ability to meet more people. So either it's like more communal dining or more group efforts or more hangout spaces that are less programmed, but kind of like a place if you want to go meet people, is one of the emerging themes from this year.
Maybe a hangout by the river. That wasn't actually on the agenda.
Yeah,
But
I love that you found that. That's so sick.
it's so funny because we didn't even know it was there. And we wandered down there, and we weren't the only ones with the idea. There was a lot of people down there.
Oh yeah, I was going 3 times a day. It was the only way to keep cool.
Best way to beat the heat in the summer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I wonder if we could just take a step back, and we kind of we talked about Fest and what it is, but I would love to hear Greg and Alex just kind of what is the long-term vision for Fest? Like, what are you envisioning here?
Yeah, we shared a little bit of it in the sort of the opening plenary, and sort of building off of what I just shared earlier about thinking about Fest as a platform. I think the long-term vision for it is really that. I think in Web3 and crypto, a lot of us are familiar and used to taking a protocol, sort of approach or a platform approach to ecosystem building and, creating the foundation whereby whereby the application layer can sort of emerge through culture or through economic incentives or through interesting activity that's all built on top of the fundamental tech stack of that foundation or of that platform. I think we were really interested as crypto native sort of organizers, but also coming purely from a cultural perspective, can you apply that to an actual event? I think historically the best examples of sort of a platform approach for a gathering is Burning Man, in that it's been in existence for 20-30 years. It brings together about 80,000 people under a shared set of values, principles, and qualities in the desert, in the Nevada desert, and through the construction of a completely temporary city that exists for 2 weeks. I think whether or not you're a burner or whether or not you subscribe to the aesthetics or the vibe, I think we can all still commend its ambition and the fact that it essentially has a GDP probably the size of many small countries, and that people come and spend all year creating these micro camps that through the network of these micro camps, which we sort of refer to as like nodes or sub-DAOs almost, operate as their own independent entities. And so there's many other examples throughout history of this type of an approach. I think Burning Man is just something that many folks have kind of been to. And so we've sort of thought a lot about what does that look like for our industry and our space in Web3. Not necessarily the same kind of like off-grid anarchist perspectives, but also what does it look like to turn this campus that we use every year for Fest, which is a 200-acre liberal arts campus in the woods, essentially about 2 hours outside of Los Angeles, and invite dozens and dozens, and hopefully in the future hundreds and hundreds of on-chain communities and subcultures to come build and sort of create their own neighborhoods inside of this larger container. And so we've always talked about like, what does it look like where FWB Fest even eventually just drops FWB from the title, and it just becomes a lot more, it's just a lot more pluralist and it becomes a space where anyone who's interested really in the intersection of sort of culture, of on-chain culture or culture in crypto, can come participate and navigate that experience, and it becomes a lot more of a sustainable event as opposed to like FWB acting as a central entity that's like curating it every single year and putting up 80 to 90% of the capital and the labor and the intensity, but instead shifting it to be a lot more pluralist. So that to us has always been an exciting vision of this, and inviting all future iterations of exciting on-chain communities who care about the same thing.
Absolutely. So I have a follow-up question, Alex, based on something you mentioned, which is I thought the size and the scale of it was absolutely perfect. There was a lot of new faces and new friends to meet, but it also felt very intimate. Do you think next year might be a lot bigger? Do you want to keep it roughly the same size? I'm curious how you guys are approaching that.
We definitely
Yeah.
want to keep it this. Oh, go. Oh, I was saying we
Yeah.
definitely want to keep it the same size. Idlewild as a town, just like from an infrastructure standpoint, can't handle more than 1,000 people. And also, I think we want to keep the intimacy there. Some of these things think that like bigger is better, or that they like need 2,000 or 3,000 people, but that ends up changing a lot of the intimacy, or the intimacy at scale, as we like to call it. So the 1,000 people that we want then like takes a different shift, that if you're bringing partners, they bring their most dedicated followers. And so one of the, I guess the other emergent things to your earlier question was like, how do we get 1,000 people but make it deeper, and make it deeper connections, and make sure that those are kind of like the 1,000 people you want to spend a weekend with. But from just like an intimacy and then an infrastructure, we don't want it to get that much bigger than what we have. Everyone kind of felt similar to, and me personally, that it was the right size for the weekend.
Yeah, for me, it was the perfect size. I don't like these events that are filled with thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, and you're kind of shoulder to shoulder. And it was interesting. It was almost like summer camp after sort of day one or day two. There's a lot of people I didn't know, but you start to recognize these familiar faces, and you feel like you're all on this journey together. I thought that was great. Moving on to the organization behind Fest, it's Friends with Benefits. We haven't really talked about that yet. I would love to just hear the background story on Friends with Benefits, Alex and Greg, how you guys got started, how you two met. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, happy to. So FW Fest was organized by Friends with Benefits. We were sort of one of the earliest social token projects that started in sort of late 2020 and during the height of the pandemic. FW was really started by a collective of various different artists and sort of technologists and hackers and folks who were really interested in the intersection of all of those different categories. Frankly, FW kind of started really as like an art experiment by Trevor, a good friend of ours who started Lil Michaela, the sort of net art virtual influencer, and was a sort of touring DJ and musician prior to that. And he was always interested in new technological mediums and how they would impact sort of creatives and their creative output. And the simple framework in which FWB started was, if DeFi could store financial value in a digital asset, could culture, or sorry, could crypto store, what does it look like to store cultural value inside of a digital asset? And this was sort of around the timing of the first NFT form factors really reaching quote unquote like larger scale adoption. And we were really interested in applying that framework to a network or a community or a scene of people. And so over the course of a weekend, Trevor hacked together, an ERC20, the FWB token, sent it, to like 30 or 40 of his friends that he posted on Twitter. Hey, if you're into crypto and culture, DM me, I'll send you some free tokens. That token granted you access into a Discord. The Discord had like 20 or 30 people for the first few weeks. And slowly people started to sort of bring and include their friends. And what we began to see was really interesting activity. We began to see, a much more shared space of community just linked together through this shared asset. We sort of had this culture of, I call it, if you see trash on the ground, you pick it up, almost like co-op style, but in a digital space. You saw artists onboarding other artists. You saw founders and CEOs of major protocols and marketplaces, sort of helping out artists who maybe had never minted an NFT before, or felt maybe intimidated by the space, literally like help them make a wallet and onboard. It became this incredibly sort of nurturing space that has now grown into over 10,000 token holders all over the world that have now pushed into organizing in-person events to kind of further this mission of helping bridge the sort of gap between culture and this sometimes, intimidating technological space. Since then, FWB has been formalized into a DAO in which our shared treasury deploys capital into different various community projects. Fest being one massive one that is voted on by the community to do each year, with where we share the entire sort of P&L and the approach, and the community can debate over if it has the right sort of investment of resources in the right categories. And so all in all, we sort of view Friends with Benefits as, almost like the ultimate artist and technological collective, but also, inherently kind of a social network. And that sort of informed a lot of our decisions to go out and build our own social software over the last 2 years, where we've created event ticketing, and we've created an event aggregation tool, and we've created, sort of on-chain social stuff. And all of that is to kind of further drive our mission, which is to connect people in a much more intimate, sort of human way, as we believe that's how you really propel major technological evolutions forward. So it's not just like the same shit spinning itself in circles, but really bringing in new perspectives into the fold. And FWB is really like the sort of breeding ground for that, or at least that we try to really create.
Very cool. And this was my first exposure to FWB, but what I'm gathering is that FWB is doing events throughout the year, right? So it's not just Fest. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And is there how does the organization decide which events to do? Is the community, like, if you're a member of FWB, can you maybe propose to do an event, or is there sort of a group that's curating these events?
Yeah, we originally had a program called Cities, which was in New York, LA, and London, where we had our biggest density. We then created this thing called Pattern Language, which was based off of Christopher Alexander's Timeless Way of Building, which is essentially just like our value set. So we put up our SOPs in our pattern language, and then any member could apply for an event key. And so that's essentially how we do. We have a small committee that approves them, and we open up event keys every few months, and we award, I think, like 10 or 12 of those. Some of them have budgets, and then some of them have just co-branding. So some members just like want to do a hike and they want an FWB cosign. So that's how we've run our events program throughout the year. And like I said earlier, we've done over 200 events in the last 2 years through this program.
Amazing. Decentralized event coordination. Love to see it.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. And because when members apply, they also have to agree to follow our pattern language and our code of conduct and our SOPs. So instead of having just kind of like one creative director that's like saying how we do events or who we program, we end up getting like very close to everything feeling like an FWB event, even though it's very localized. So it's worked pretty incredibly at scale and been pretty impressive that like anytime you show up, it definitely feels like it, even if you don't know who's, being presented or promoting it.
Very smart. Yeah. We had Mark Tyneway on to talk about, I don't know if you guys heard about this event called Zalu, but one of the things we talked about there was creating this sort of blueprint or open sourcing the way to curate these events and to create these events. And it sounds like you guys have already made a lot of progress there. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, if you're a member, we actually put everything into a Wikipedia, so any member can get access to these SOPs.
Awesome. Well, I think we kind of heard from Benji on what his favorite parts are. I wonder, Alex and Greg, I'm just curious, like, were there any moments that stood out to you over the weekend where you're like, wow, this is amazing? Any moments in particular?
Oh, I want Alex to go first because I haven't heard his.
Ty Haney's run was baller. Shout out Ty Haney in the crowd. She's the founder of Try Your Best and Joggy, and she gave an amazing main stage talk about how crypto goes consumer, and also put her money where her mouth was, walk the walk and talk the talk, because then she led a run the morning of, and led like a bunch of community members as well on a run throughout Idlewild. So that was tight. Thank you for coming, Ty. Yeah, the Creek was also a lovely hang, which I think a lot of also people did. Yeah, I think it's honestly, the performances, Caroline Polachek was incredible, but I think it really was just how I was explaining it to friends after, and I'm curious, like, Ty, your perspective too, because I feel like you also come from different worlds, And I think Zaku was there as well, if you want to pull Ty up, if you feel like talking, and reflecting on your experience. But for me, I often feel like, because crypto has kind of this there's almost like negative reputation at times, especially in cultural spaces. I'll be honest, the last year to 2 years, it felt a little bit embarrassing being like, to be contributing in crypto. I think, when I'm out and about in my normal life and people start chatting and talking and they go, what do you do? Benji and I were talking, like Benji says, doesn't even say crypto anymore. Benji says, I work in retro public goods funding. And everyone's like, oh, cool, you run a nonprofit? Or for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I work in technology, or I work in culture. And I was thinking about why that's the case. And I think it's because we really don't have great community spaces where we feel really, really seen. And I think every year with Fest, given this is year 2, I walk around and I'm actually like, it sounds kind of corny to say, but I'm actually like proud to be working in crypto, or whatever crypto form crypto takes. And I think that is always my highlight, where it really reinvigorates me and really inspires me, because I look around and I see just amazing artists and entrepreneurs and people who are building really, really awesome stuff, especially in the bear market vibes, and aren't just here, for the money or whatnot, but really think the technology is fundamentally interesting, and seeing how that technology gets applied to their artistic practice, or their writing practice, or their film practice, or their business practice. And that felt really, really inspiring. And I felt very seen. And so I think that to me was like my favorite part of the event.
Yeah.
Alex, I just wanted to add something really quickly. So it's like, I think in crypto, we see, we're online so much. It seems black and white for a lot of participants, but going to FW Fest, meeting everyone there is like, crypto's a rainbow. There's multiple colors, and it's like more of a compliment to everything else that we do in our lives. And I think being able to see that in person has been remarkable. And yeah, I agree with everything you said. Love that.
I think some of my favorite moments, the envelop, if anyone made it down to like the edge, it was an immersive soundscape. There was a sound bath that Lens presented that Telefon Tel Aviv did a live score to, which I was just stopping by to poke my head in and ended up losing an hour there. For the 400 people that we intimately watched the sunset with, I don't know if anyone was up there, but this group Elevate, which has their own kind of like roving sound system, set up in a corner underneath a tree and just played like one of the most vibey sets ever. And then I think like kind of similar, like my entry into Web3 was actually through smart contracts, pre-NFT, just about around artist rights, through a concept of like Droit to Suite, which I won't go into, but essentially like better payment, better economic terms, more fairness for the creatives. And I think that like that kind of got lost along the way. And similar, every time I say I work in Web3 or blockchain, people are like crypto or NFTs. And I try to say, that's one piece of a very large pie. And so it was amazing to see all these people come through this weekend who are either like very deep in the space or new to the space. But I think a lot of my friends and a lot of people, and even a lot of our partners who are just used to going to like your normal like tech conferences of the world, saw a different coordination mechanism and saw a different way that culture can be uplifted and reinvented and repackaged through the use of blockchain. And I think a lot of people came up the mountain with one perspective and off the mountain with another perspective. And the conversations we were having already in these first few days, in which I think will continue, about how do we actually use this like very powerful technology to expand culture and provide artists with the right rights, and builders with the right rights and fair economic standings, and just actually make the world a little bit of a better place, not like a crypto utopia, but just a more equitable place, was one of the best takeaways that I saw people eyes open, that I think we working on this had good insights too of how this could really be transformative.
Yeah, +1 to the sunset, Greg. I was up there on the hill. That was a beautiful sunset. And I'd also just like to answer my own question. Shout out Mary Lattimore. She played the harp in the amphitheater, and I didn't realize I was such a huge fan of harp music. It was incredibly soothing, and I think I'm going to be adding some harp songs to my Spotify playlist now.
Amazing.
Okay, so I think we're kind of winding down here, but before we close this out, I do want to just circle back to Benji. Benji, I'm curious, did you have any interesting conversation with builders during Fest? And maybe for people listening, what do you think is sort of the value proposition for creators to come to OP Mainnet, to Zora, to Base?
Yeah, so I think similar to the themes that Alex and Greg were pointing out earlier, where you can almost think of like a lot of the crypto space as this idea of on-chain culture, but essentially like how can we find a way to connect all the various different parts of crypto together, right? Like there are developers in crypto, there are traders, there are artists, there are hobbyists, VCs, institutions, brands. It's a very eclectic mix. And all of these like spaces essentially, like they occur digitally, they were all on the internet. And it's very difficult to find them all congregated in one spot. You know, one might go to a conference, but it's specifically tied to one part of the thing. So it's like maybe you go to a conference that's specifically for investors. Maybe you go to a conference that's specifically for builders. Maybe you go to a hackathon specifically for builders. I found that we don't really have many spaces where all of these different types of folks can come together and just honestly, without any pressure, without any intention to go and like strike a BD deal or like try to extract some sort of value out of an event, but instead just a place for people to go and hang out with each other, like be in one spot, connect through the universal language of music. And that's essentially what Fest really helped bring in. And essentially, I think about this idea of like, how do you traverse the on-chain sea? And I come to the conclusion that like you traverse the on-chain sea by building a boat that everyone can come into and like stay on, and essentially like maybe even transporting to an island, for example, to continue the metaphor. And I felt that Fest was an incredible way to do that. I've never been to an event where there's just all these different types, like the developers, the traders, the artists, the hobbyists, the VCs, new people, all in one spot. That was truly remarkable. And I think how that ladders into Optimism Mainnet and the Optimism Collective, in my opinion, is essentially Optimism is not just a blockchain. You know, it is a collective. There's a goal. We're trying to do a lot of things with retroactive funding. And that covers a lot of different bases. Being able to go and meet these people who can benefit essentially through the concept of retroactive funding was very, very eye-opening in how we can express what we do and what our goals are in a very human level without the pressure of like getting X action done. I think one thing to note when it comes to creators in that sense, that was definitely very eye-opening was if we think of art and if we think of retroactive funding, for those of you that don't know, Optimism has this idea behind like retroactive public goods funding, where essentially people who build things that the collective gets value out of can get retroactively rewarded for it. Why that's interesting is if we think of like societies and we think of like collectives in general, like let's say a country, a city, a lot of the value that people get in their daily lives as living in a city or, you know, participating within an economy or being within a group is through things like art. It is like if I'm in a city and I walk outside and there's beautiful art all around me, I have a nicer day. Like that's lovely. And through that analogy, essentially art is a public good. People who are creators of art are creators of public goods. And unfortunately, because like the economic systems of today in many ways do not like have an intrinsic reward for people to create public goods, we may actually end up where like less art is created as a result. Now, what Optimism Mainnet does is, and what the collective does is these rounds of retroactive funding, which essentially means that people who come to the collective, people who provide educational resources about like what we're trying to do here, people who make this place not just a blockchain, but a home for folks to connect, for folks to build, for folks to like network with each other and essentially like try to tell their story, they can get retroactively rewarded. And I think there's definitely something there in the early innings of the idea of how can we turn art, which is a public good, into this process and bring a lot of these creators to a place where they don't have to feel like, no one should feel like a financial martyr for doing the right thing, essentially, for doing what they believe in, for telling their story, for sharing their experience. And art allows for that sharing of experience to happen very visibly and in a very like easy to understand way, essentially. And I think that's something with OP mainnet and where we're seeing this emergence, where we are getting more artists, and it's going to be very exciting and interesting to see how that plays into this concept of retroactive funding. So to kind of cap that off, like the first point is essentially we don't really have many spaces for every single participant in crypto to come together without there being a set agenda. We have a lot of different conferences, we have a lot of different hackathons, which are incredible for incentivizing and like creating certain subsets of the entire crypto economy. But there's never been a home where like every single person is there, and every person is there not just as I am from X team doing Y thing, but everyone's there because it's like, I am me. I enjoy music. I enjoy meeting people, and I can have a shared experience with all these other folks within crypto, some folks that are new to crypto, and just like enjoy music together and just have great conversations together and talk about ideas, talk about things that we want to see, things we want to do outside of crypto too. And that kind of weaves the way into the conversation, weaves the way into how can crypto support what you're doing, not just like plugging crypto into an equation, but like learning about like what is your intention as an artist. What is wrong with the current model of like how things work, and how can crypto help you kind of fix that? And I think those are very illuminating. And with the concept of retro funding, Optimism can basically allow for a lot of these ideas to be enacted on without fear of like not being able to get rewarded. So I think there's something where I'm seeing this emergence. I want to be able to help educate more artists, help like learn from them as well. I think I oftentimes I think of Optimism as more so of an enabler than a director. It's like, if you are interested in this, if you are interested in the idea of retro funding, if you're interested in the idea of collective organization and DAOs and just like building things for a greater, wider community, we want to hear your ideas. We want to help you build things, whether it's like you're an artist and you're like new to the space and you don't like know how the technical side works. Well, we have people within the collective who are there to help you out. Whether you're a builder and you wanted to get into art, well, now we have artists who can also be connected to you. And we create this connective tissue across like the broader goal that we're all aiming for. And I think events like Fest allow for all of these people to meet, all of these people to talk about themselves, first and foremost, as people, as humans behind the computer screen, and hopefully collaborate. And where Optimism comes in there is, how can we, one, help that collaboration happen alongside partners like FWB? And two, how can we, post collaboration, if there's an impact to the collective, how can we ensure that people who create that impact don't have to feel like they're a financial martyr, or that they have to essentially figure out a way to monetize, for example. And the last point on that is like, I think a lot of really interesting innovations, I think a lot of really interesting art and culture in the world is created, and then there's a pressure to monetize, because that's how investment works, right? Like, it's like, oh, I can't get investment into something unless I find a way to monetize it. And we see a lot of artists and we see a lot of folks trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole, which leads to like things being tainted, where it's like, you might create something because it's coming from your soul, but you're forced to monetize it, which kind of takes away your soul element from it. Well, through RPGF, essentially, you would not have to feel that pressure. You create what you want to create. You help the collective. You create an impact, and rest assured, there are ways for you to be rewarded for that impact. And definitely want to continue evolving this idea. It's very in its earliest innings. And the way that ideas will evolve is through everyone here. It's through everyone who's listening. It's through everyone who will be listening. And we want to do this hand in hand, and not just like have a way where like, OP Labs will have an idea and then it's what ends up happening, but like actually hearing from the creators, meeting them, making friends, and understanding what the pain points are, and then helping educate folks that this is a realm for like the end of financial martyrdom for doing the right thing. That was a lot, but hopefully that like paints a picture on OP Mainnet creators and how Fest plays into it.
Yeah, I want to just double click on something you said, Benji, which is, comparing Fest to some of these other crypto conferences where sort of understandably the conversation naturally is directed at the technology, and it gets quite insular, rather technical. I think one of the great things about Fest was there was such an eclectic group of people, and that resulted in an eclectic conversation, which I really appreciated. Technology, on-chain, blockchain technology itself is only valuable insofar as it serves the people who are using it, right? And so there's other aspects of being human than just the tech, and I thought Fest was a great way to explore some of those other areas. So I really enjoyed it. I think we're winding down here. I'd like to just thank Alex and Greg for joining us. Congratulations on a great event, a successful event, and yeah, really appreciate you coming on OP Radio and sharing some of your story.
Thanks for having us. And we're going to be putting tickets for Fest 2024 up for sale very soon. So keep your eyes on our socials.
And to get those tickets, Greg, you do have to be a member of Friends with Benefits, right? Would that be the first step?
No, we do want people to join. No, but we're working on a way that if you actually hold FWB tokens, you buy an FWB tokens, it'll be cheaper than your regular fiat ticket. So if you want to buy some FWB tokens in anticipation of it, that would probably be the best place to start.
Okay, but it's open to anyone, whether or not you're a member of FWB.
Yes, as you said, we want to build a boat big enough for everyone, or 1,000 person.
Awesome. Well, thanks once again, guys. Really appreciate you joining and hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next week on OP Radio, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.